And they were very exciting days, years, should I say. We were very driven because we had this goal ahead of ourselves. We wanted to find out whether Ray Owen's original observations really were of universal interest. Now, Ray Owen is a very extraordinary man in the sense that he is the only scientist I know of who ever published a paper without any antecedents at all. His paper came out of the blue and was a 3-page paper in Science, which the immunological community completely ignored for 3 or 4 years until Burnett picked it up and incorporated the findings into a theory of antibody formation, which he then published in 1948. What Owen did was he was a geneticist working at Wisconsin University, and he was interested in the blood groups of cattle. That's what his interest. And to his amazement, he discovered that cattle dizygotic twins, which are genetically quite different, of course, had not only their own blood groups, but also the blood groups quite evidently derived from the twin partner. Now, he realized that years before that, an American embryologist had described the fact that dizygotic cattle twins share their placenta. They have a fused placenta, so that blood flows from one to the other quite freely during fetal life. So what Owen assumed was that blood cell precursors, red blood cell precursors, must have been exchanged, settled down in their foreign environment, and churned out red cells of their own lineage, which is perfectly correct. And he thought, well, and this finding, the fact that the foreign cells were accepted after exchange in fetal life, set the ball rolling on immunological tolerance, because Burnett realized this was an important discovery. He embedded this in his monograph in 1948. And meanwhile, Medawar and Billingham had come to the same sort of conclusion by a quite different route. Medawar had been asked to find a test for distinguishing between fraternal and identical twin calves, because, believe it or not, this was of some agricultural importance to be able to tell fraternal twins at a very early stage in life when it was morphologically not possible to do that. So Medawar said, well, nothing could be easier. Yes, of course I'll do that. What he did was, with Billingham's help, they exchanged skin grafts between fraternal twins and identical twins, and expected the identical twin skin grafts to be accepted and the fraternal skin grafts to be rejected. And of course, they were accepted. They were very puzzled about that, until they then came across Ray Owen's paper, and the penny dropped, and they realized that some form of immunological accommodation must have happened in these twin calves, which led to the acceptance of the precursor cells and the production of red cells of the genetic lineage from which they came. And that set off the whole mad chase for the Holy Grail in immunology, the induction of clinical tolerance. We didn't think of clinical tolerance for years and years. That didn't seem possible at the time. The most telling one is probably the development of our understanding of histoincompatibility and the development of the dissection of the HLA system, which of course is important not only in transplantation, but has a much wider significance in terms of disease associations and so on and so forth. And I think that is a major contribution to medicine as a whole. The other one would be the development of immunosuppressive drugs, which of course again have much wider application than in transplantation. Well, I think there will be a Transplantation Society in 50 years' time, because I do not believe that some of the fundamental problems which are addressed by organ transplantation will have been resolved by other means. For example, I don't believe that gene transfer will be able to solve our problems. I don't believe that genetic engineering will solve our problems. So I think there will always be a need for transplantation. So I'm optimistic so far that is concerned. Well, I come back to immunological tolerance. I think that really still remains the holy grail. And once it becomes possible to induce tolerance in the clinic by methods which are acceptable, which are easy to apply, which are safe and effective, the field will be totally transformed, and not only transplantation, because it will apply to other areas of medicine as well. In my days, when I was president in 1978, politics didn't enter into the discussions very much. We were essentially scientific and medical, surgical meeting. But now it has become very political, and it is really a question of the society applying pressure on the governments of these third world countries to understand the importance of transplantation of organs and the need for that. And so this would mean constant contact with the health authorities of those countries, which I know you're doing already, and admirably. And Jeremy Chapman has started this in Australia in a big way, and that is admirable. On the other hand, I'm slightly fearful that the main purpose of the Transplantation Society may be diverted somewhat from its real objectives, and that is to achieve really successful transplantation in all kinds of departments. And so I'm a little bit worried about that, but I think it is very important. The other one, I think, is Dubernard's hand and face transplants, which I find quite remarkable and extraordinary, and I would never believe that was possible. Especially I'm conscious of the fact, having worked with skin grafts all my life, I'm conscious of the fact how immunogenic the skin is. It doesn't need much skin to provoke a very powerful immune response. And for Dubernard to have overcome that with a composite hand or face transplant is remarkable. Well, a lot of expectations have been placed on xenografting over the years. In fact, there was a time when people felt very hopeful about xenotransplantation, and then it tended to fade away a bit, and it's now coming back again. I myself am a little bit doubtful that xenotransplantation will ever replace allotransplantation, and for the reason that although in some ways it is easier sometimes to suppress the cellular response in xenotransplantation, there is the antibody to deal with, and it imposes another order of magnitude of problems on the solution of the problem. It is essential to give young physicians and young scientists the opportunity of mixing with the senior people and have the chance to talk to them, to hear them talk about their field of research. And I think the society is fulfilling a very important function there. Point. I was a zoology student at Birmingham University, where Peter Medawar was professor of zoology. Medawar and Billingham and I are all zoologists. But he was already then, he had an interest in immunology, and he gave several lectures on immunology, which I found very fascinating. And at the end of my studies, he asked me whether I would like to join him as a postgraduate student in his research team. Now, at that time, I had already applied to Cambridge University for a diploma course in education because I intended to become a teacher. So he diverted me from that path, for which I've been ever grateful. And I then worked 13 years with him. To begin with, Billingham and Medawar and I were a very closely knit team working on the tolerance work. It is a source of great regret to me that Ray Owen was not included in the Nobel Prize, and in fact in my autobiography I published the letter which Peter Medawar wrote to Ray Owen after the receipt of the Nobel Prize, saying how sorry he was that Ray had not been included. Ray's initial discovery was of such importance that he should have been, even though he failed to develop the ideas which emerged from that paper. So that is how I became an immunologist. And I very often ask the question, when did you stop thinking of yourself as a zoologist, and when did you start thinking of yourself as an immunologist? And I can't answer that question. I think probably after the publication of our first Nature paper on immunological tolerance in 1953, the three of us felt more to be immunologists and zoologists, but we never renounced our zoological background.